Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Tom School of Life weekly update. We got here Barbara Williams, Jeremy Evans, David Moore, and myself, Kevin Dolan, here to talk about what's going on in the group this week. And I wanted to just present as our topic, how do we collaborate more than just supporting each other on our individual projects? How do we work together to move the ball? And then maybe how can, if you're running into problems, how can your facilitator help you, or how can you help yourself? Or maybe are there technical solutions that we're working on rolling out to make it easier to collaborate? So welcome everybody. Good to see you. Let's start with David. Tell us about what collaborations you're seeing, and maybe if we can identify some common factors that make those successful.
I'm seeing more and more people wanting to have one-on-one meetings, and that's included in both geographically. We've had some members that have actually gone out of their way to drive and meet with one another, have lunch. I was able to meet up with a guy from our exit group on Friday night for dinner here in my area, and so that was a unique opportunity to be kind of in this world of your online world meets your offline world. And I'm thinking that a lot of folks are wanting to have projects that we're not all solopreneurs. Many of us are probably entrepreneurial in that we want to be part of a collaboration. And I sense that we're going to start to see people form groups and calls that are around specific topics that are member generated. So we've got Connor Haynes, who started the tech call, and he's now got a regular group of attendees. We've got another gentleman that's looking to start a maker's call, and this will be for people that are engineers or creators of physical things. And that has been something that's kind of started as a series of DMs, but it's becoming rather quickly something that is emerging as a call. So I'm loving the kind of do it yourself, find a friend, meet up privately. If you need a Zoom account, get a Zoom account. If not, use the BBB video chat feature in the Talk.Tom School of Life chat area. But essentially, what I love finding out on the call that people got together and I didn't even know about it. That there was a call, that they drove across the state, and you hear about it after the fact. And that is a really a cool feeling to get.
A couple of David's accountability groups actually set up an accountability group where he wasn't invited, just them.
Yeah. Basically, so I'm becoming obsolete, which is, and I just wave from the shore.
Yeah. I think part of what is cool about finding one person that you feel really comfortable with is that it is then pretty easy. I mean, David's in this seat for a lot of what I'm doing personally. A lot of my ventures is David and I are partnering, and it's super easy for me to think of somebody else who might be valuable. And instead of me having this should I, shouldn't I analysis paralysis, it's something that we talk about together. And, two heads are better than one. And we just get a lot more comfortable with bringing in other collaborators. And it's, it's also easier to kind of establish yourself as an entity that already exists. And so someone, you sort of bring them in on your terms, and it's a really valuable start. So I would say definitely anybody who's looking to start a project, be looking for one. It doesn't necessarily have to be hey, we're going to go 50-50 on this startup, but one person that you can bounce things off of whose opinion and goodwill you trust. And if you need help, searching for that person, maybe it's not on your call, maybe you want to bounce around some calls, talk to your facilitator, and we'll see if we can figure something out. So thank you for that, Dave. That's awesome. Jeremy, I'd be interested to hear what kind of collaborations you've seen and what's worked.
One, I just checked. We have 1096. That's not the right way to say that number. It's basically 1,100 private conversations over the chat. Now, I've read every one of these private conversations personally, and I can report that the level of discourse is very. Now, I actually don't think I could read them. I'm sure there's some kind of super hacky way. My point is,
Making everyone nervous, Jeremy.
have already had a lot of people reaching out to each other. I mean, honestly, I didn't think about that number ahead of time. I didn't look it up ahead of time. That blows me away. You think that that's not messages. That's not me and David texting back and forth what we ate that day, because I do that with David as often as possible. I take photos of my meals. I send it to David. David does the same, etc. No, those are individual rooms. They're created when two people link up. That is not us. And that's not all the rooms in the chat either. That's just when two people come together. That's beautiful. It's kind of spontaneous order that I think is exactly what should be emerging from this. In terms of collaboration, I'm immediately want to become devil's advocate. Living in this green hell that I live in, that's a Wilco reference that exactly two people will get. And for the record, I'm not endorsing Wilco. Wilco is far too depressing for the average person. But yeah, a part of me wants to be a devil's advocate. A lot of people wait on a collaboration. The accountability group itself is a kind of collaboration. A lot of people wait for investors. A lot of people wait for Godot. There's different versions of this. And for the 6 people that will get this reference, I'm not talking about the game engine, right? I'm talking about some kind of movie that was some kind of art film that I never saw, where 2 people just hang out at a bus stop the entire time. A lot of people will wait forever for that person. A collaborator, truly, I think, at the most basic level, is to drive you forward, to have somebody to bounce your ideas off of, so that you're not isolated and alone, hammering away at a computer by yourself, doing something that you can't describe in even 5 minutes of dedicated conversation, right? Collaborator is somebody who is there with you. The accountability groups do that. Having one such person in your vicinity is really, really valuable. From that devil's advocate position, I would say that I've encountered a lot of people who wait, and it tends to be inexperienced folks. I think that you can get that level of collaboration probably with anybody who even has related interests to you, as long as you take the initiative. Prince Charming may or may not come. I wouldn't count on him. I think Prince Charming is related to the government. And I want to say something mean about the second coming. I'm not going to say that.
Here's my synthesis. You're going in a wild direction.
Listen, somebody has spiced it up. We're all going to shake hands and feel good and this and that.
Here's my synthesis.
The more common problem I experience is people being afraid to move.
Yes, and what I would say is, I think you go kiss the frogs. You go talk to lots of people.
We go. I like that. Yeah.
And you look for collaborators actively and assiduously, and it's really valuable when you find one who's even halfway decent. So like, you're not waiting around for a perfect collaborator. You're looking for someone whose goodwill and like baseline competence you actually respect what they have to say, and that's really all you need.
And that's David Moore. You can reach him on the Rocket Chat.
Baseline. We're ragging on David today.
Well, kissing frogs and Jeremy's green background. I think it's always be collaborating, and always be kissing frogs. And to the extent that I think one way to find good collaborators is to always be collaborating, and then you start to see patterns of good collaborators when you're involved in a lot of pro bono work. And so I think the reason I think we say make entrepreneurship a hobby is that you really want to get experience in volunteer collaborations, so that you start to notice what it is you love about specific partners. Then you can start to develop kind of your entrepreneurial love languages, and you start to really know what it is that you value with other collaborators, and that's only through a lot of frogs.
And to be clear, David's a fantastic one-on-one collaborator, which is why we asked him to come basically do that professionally, just like Jeremy and Barbara. They're incredible resources to bounce ideas off of. And if you haven't scheduled your quarterly one-on-one and you want to start that process, they probably won't have the bandwidth to be like a regular sounding board, but they can help you find one and point you in the right direction and connect you with people who are really useful in that respect. So,
well, that's what I was going to say, actually, is that for the people who are shy and like really don't want to do stuff, come to your facilitator. I love shoving people together. I will send an email and I'll put both of you on it and say, hey, so-and-so, you do this and this. Well, you so-and-so, you do this and this. You guys should get together. And I've been able to see a few people get together on either topical things or project or whatever. I've seen people go on each other's podcast. One person I'll name drop because I know he won't mind is Brian O'Leary with his O'Leary Review. His project is to get 100 people from the school on his podcast. And I think I say his name in almost all of my group calls. Sorry to all my other groups, but he's doing a great job. And I love listening to these interviews because I'm watching, two members flourish in this kind of format. And it's cool to see them all comfortable talking about their projects in a public way. And then, of course, that's just going to invite more people, hopefully, to collaborate with, oh, I heard you on the O'Leary Review. I want to work with you now. You're a career coach or, whatever. So yeah, that's been really fun to see.
And I mean, if he sticks to that and puts 100 people on his podcast, he's going to be such a powerful super connector.
Yes.
And that has intrinsic value. I mean, that's basically what we do for a living, is just be super connectors. And if you can accomplish that, the level of acumen and expertise that you need to have in addition to that is actually pretty small. You can be super valuable just having a really rich Rolodex.
I remember reading Never Eat Alone. It was one of my first business books. And I had that very realization that if I was connected, that my business acumen could not need to be as deep in other areas, but by virtue of the connectivity itself would be its own massive utility.
Well, and you learn so much. Like the acumen comes as you ask the stupid questions and you have and you just see things happen over and over and over again. You detect patterns, you find the pitfalls. And what's cool about doing that as a connector is it doesn't have to happen to you. Like all the mistakes, you can just watch them and point them out to other people and have tremendous value that way.
Yeah, I would say to anyone too who's enjoyed the 30-minute one-on-one with your facilitator, if you've already enjoyed that, start thinking about other people in the group life for which you'd like to have a 30-minute one-on-one with, and make that introduction and offer the same format. Even develop your own Calendly if that makes sense.
It's super easy. Yeah, especially if you're not charging. It's really easy to have just a free Calendly.
Yep.
I got 3 things. I had to write them down. One, very first thing you do as a consultant is you make a Rolodex. You may or may not have a Rolodex right now. You don't hire consultants cold. They're always a network effect. A lot of people in the latter years of their career want to become a consultant. Sometimes people happen into it. You quit a job, you get rehired, etc. The most important thing you can do is physically map out that network. Have a spreadsheet of everybody's skills, be able to make those kinds of connections. You become valuable to people, especially at larger corporations. You get hired easily. People frown on this as nepotism. It's the way the world works, right? 2, there's a clear competence hierarchy, and this actually plays a little bit into the asymmetry. So Brian has put himself out there as somebody who is going to do 100 podcasts, which, by the way, is a little bit of an ambitious goal, right? Oh, yeah. Those podcasts die on the vine at like 5.
I'm at 42, and it's part of my business.
Right. And the people who are competent are going to asymmetrically connect with multiples more people than the average person. That competence itself is partly evinced by virtue of their industry. So Brian is very industrious and he outputs a lot of content and he takes what he does very seriously. It's self-evident, right? You don't need anybody, and it's growing, it's improving over time, be that production merits, et cetera, et cetera. One competent connection is worth a lot more than 10 fair weather connections. I mean, it's not a loyalty thing. I don't mean to suggest that, but probably the most important skill that I developed early on working for myself is being able to smell out complete and utter nonsense. And you are petitioned with nonsense perpetually. And if you are protected in the warm cocoon of a corporate W-2, you take what's given. There's very little discernment to be had. And I think the buildup of that skill, the ability to figure out who are the people that are worth spending time with, is something that really just has to be learned. I'm not sure how.
And what activities
are worth prioritizing?
Are worth spending time on. Yeah. I mean, just because, yeah, you get it handed to you, and
right.
You're strongly disincentivized from assessing the value, because if you all you're going to do if you assess the value of some of these activities is make yourself feel bad and maybe piss off your boss.
Right.
Right. And
so there's a certain type of person who's really adaptive to that environment. And this is not to denigrate this, because I'm actually impressed with a lot of these people, but there's a certain type of person who can just head down and do it and gut, and they don't need it to be meaningful. And those people, right, if you can give them a vision, they become just phenomenal executors, because they're not constantly reevaluating the does this matter? Am I doing the right? What am I doing? Am I a delicate flower who's being in the right sunlight? That's me. That's totally my orientation. I'm constantly reevaluating. And guys like me, through that shuffling and churning process, sometimes we land on really powerful sources of meaning. And that's part of why there are people like me. But people like me struggle with execution, because that churn process doesn't stop once you found something. And so I think these execution people, and to bring this back to the collaboration thing, there are a lot of people in this group who are future-oriented, dreamer, vision types. And there are a lot of people here who are execution, give me a quest types. And when you can get those types of people together, they can be phenomenally powerful if they can learn to speak each other's language and see each other's value. So you really can't synthesize that on your own. You can't become both types of person, in my opinion.
You can't. And I think that one of the things that's been so valuable for me is the conversations I've had with Scott Fishbuch, and understanding the silver pairs and golden pairs that I have as an ENFP with other personality types. When I'm the guy that can go find a million things to start, but I love a collaboration where somebody who's a finisher is tethering me to the completion of a project. And I can have, I can know a lot about business, but inside I'm kind of like, as Roger Sterling says in Mad Men, a child who wants to get his way, right? That's what I am at my core. But if I can align myself with those finisher types, they can see it through. And so but trying to be both those people just simply won't happen. So I think a conversation with Scott is always something I recommend to, if you're stuck on your personality and you're wondering why it is that you find yourself starting many great and wonderful things, but not bringing them to fruition. Helping narrow your search of collaborators is something that comes from a conversation with Scott.
I'm thinking about friction points that we sometimes see, ways that it gets hard for people to collaborate. I'm going to start with one, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on how we overcome this. One of the friction points that I've seen, especially among introverted types, is I just don't I don't have an excuse, or I don't have a reason to talk to this person. And I'm really awkward just saying, hey, I want to talk to you, because what are we going to talk about? So what are some good excuses to start a conversation?
Who's introverted?
My facilitator told me that you would benefit from a conversation.
Okay.
that might be as simple as, I'm here on somebody else's errand, is sometimes a good way. But I think that's kind of your last resort. But someone told me to contact you and thought that we might benefit from a conversation. Or also, I like the one that you kind of state your belief. You say, I'm just a believer that when somebody recommends somebody a number of times to me, that it makes sense to have a conversation. And you've been recommended to me a number of times. And in my experience, something good might come of that conversation. Just demonstrating your belief in the principle of emergence, demonstrating your belief in the serendipity that you've experienced in the past and that it might reoccur again. Because I think that's a human notion that people can relate to and go, you know what, I've felt that in my life before too. Let's roll the dice.
Very strong sales technique. And also you lead with a compliment, obviously. The challenge I have so I like the latter, but the former concerns me because you're not building that core strength. Because oftentimes you do need to be able to reach out to people that you're uncertain about, right? You need to be able to reach to people that are above you in the pecking order to pull yourself up, or make valuable, mutually beneficial offers. Fundamentally, I think that's what business is about. So I struggle with this because
maybe that's bold. A good way to bifurcate the question. If you are talking to someone who you feel is a peer, in terms of experience or whatever, then that's maybe a different conversation than creating a contact with. I had a conversation with a CEO of a pretty big company this morning, and it is not something that I would have been comfortable. And I'm very comfortable cold calling, but I would not have been comfortable cold calling this guy. And so setting up some pins ahead of time, contacting his contacts can make a big difference, both in terms of, can I get a meeting, and also can I be prepared for that meeting? Is this someone who's like, don't waste my time, or is this someone who's going to be like irritated if I'm terse? Usually if they're a busy person, they're not irritated if you're terse, but right. Who am I dealing with, and what are they looking for, and how could I benefit them?
As someone on this call who's probably played the least amount of video games, I think there is a value in levels of video games, right? You're learning the controls, you're learning the commands. And I think as you're trying to access someone who's maybe a few levels away from what might feel like a natural reach, there is value in getting to know their network and getting to know the language that they speak, the things that are important to them by virtue of kind of one level at a time circling in on them. And I don't think so. As much as I love a Hail Mary or a long shot or a direct route to the setter, to meet the wizard, I think that there can be value in the conversations you have along the way.
Maybe that's a blind spot for more systems oriented, more technical type people, is that they maybe underestimate the extent to which there is systematic work in developing a social network. And
write down the Rolodex.
It's not just this magical charisma quality that certain people have and certain people don't. There's all kinds of groundwork you can lay to make that situation easier and smoother.
I think that there's the opportunity here too within the school is, if you do feel like, for a lot of more mentor type people that are really just offering a lot of value to the other person, I will actually, as a facilitator, I'll reach out to that mentor person and say, hey, this is this person's deal. They could really use some help here. Do you mind having a conversation with them? So they can say no if they want to. Mm-hmm. They haven't. In my experience, they've been very happy to help, which is awesome to see. But I don't do like an introduction email in that situation. I only go to the mentor and let them kind of decide when that makes sense for them. So that's, I would say, for the people in the school, at least in this environment, you can always reach out to your facilitator, and that person may be able to just kind of put in a word for you. That's one way of breaking the ice on that level if you don't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
There is a culture here of mentoring and collab. That's it's not, nobody has to say yes, but there is an expectation that if you can, that's part of what you're here to do is to mentor and make connections. And so you are not a stranger off the street. You are involved in the school of life together, and that breaks down a lot of that hierarchy and distance.
Barbara touched on a really cool thing that you can do if you feel like you're lacking credibility, and that is simply to be a super connector or become a super connector. So one way that you can provide value to people who are out of your range in current moments is to provide them with introductions, right? So maybe you've got something you want to pitch to them down the road, but in the meantime, or in the in-between time, you're going to send them a lot of people that they might want to meet. And then by virtue of you being an introducer, they start to attribute a value to you that maybe you wouldn't have just through your own personal accomplishments, but they attribute because of your understanding of their situation, and that you keep sending them individuals that are that are properly attuned for their opportunities. And so they go, Barbara keeps sending me, or David keeps sending me, or Jeremy keeps sending me the right people. They clearly have an understanding of what I do. And maybe they haven't, achieved at the level that I normally engage with, but they sure have studied me and continue to send me the right types of people my way.
All right. I'm ready to explode. I'm doing this a lot. I'm thinking too hard. I'm writing too many notes. So hold on. Before we move on crazy far, one, I totally agree. Demonstrate competence. You have the core tenets of persuasion: logos, pathos, ethos. You build up your ethos by demonstrating competence again and again. Logos / pathos, but really logos, is going to come in whenever you're making mutually beneficial value offerings. Number one thing, I'm on the phone with a CEO of a mid-sized company 5 times a week at a minimum, and I have been for 7 years or something, right? Number one thing, CEOs, executive function. This is why I was pointing to this earlier. I would love that to be an Easter egg that we track down into the ancient archives. The executive function is, and my degree, by the way, is neuroscience. So this is a lot of how I think about the world, is what's degraded with drug use, video games, et cetera, et cetera. It's also exactly what the chief executive officer is using consistently in their day-to-day practice, because the chief executive officer is generally not getting in the trenches. They are deciding who goes to which trench, and they're deciding which trenches are worth having, which ones are worth losing. This requires rapid decision-making and prioritization. It is the key skill of the business owner in the long term. In the immediate term, for the freelancer, you could be a technical person. Absolutely. A business owner is fundamentally always taking on the CEO role, which means that when you're talking to CEOs, you generally want to be prioritizing your language and being very succinct. My business turn on, so to speak, I'm the only one making this fun, by the way, putting some juice in there. My business turn on is when somebody says, right, what's my buyback period? What's the monthly recurring revenue that I'm going to get from this? How much is this going to cost? Exactly. I want you to take over the entire project. What's the timeline? What are the individual key points that I'm going to know that this is progressing? I want somebody to cut me off and get to the nitty-gritty details. And you can identify within 30 seconds if you're talking to that kind of person. And by the way, these are the people that are running competent companies. Especially at a totally cold conversation. Now, to back up from that, there's some aspects of that within the group. For example, shout out to Casey Benko, who is working with 5, 6, 7 other technical people in the group at his company, and he is finding tasks, ways for people to integrate in with a new business offering. Casey Benko is hyper competent. He's one of these people that is asymmetrically connecting and offering real money-making opportunities. That is something that has to be earned. It's something that comes from long practice, determination, and grit to actually build up an organization where you have the clients, for example, to be able to say, I need 5, 6 technical guys to slot in here. But I guess my broader point here, because I'm getting too into the business nitty gritty, maybe. At School of Life, we have the 11,000 conversations. Regrettably, I haven't read any of them. But the beauty is people do feel very, very comfortable reaching out to each other. And there's a baseline level of trust. You are a rare bird participating in this community. Everybody in the community knows that, right? Everybody knows that I am going to cross 10,000 people before I find the next libertarian in my random walk through society, right? It is a very unusual circumstance and synchronicity for everybody to be gathered here together. And that has opened up a lot of opportunities. We're on easy mode here, right? When I'm picking up the phone and I'm talking with the lead developer of Drupal, which happened this week, and I got to do a quote. Oh my God, I'm drowning in quotes. But that guy, he doesn't know me from Jack. And it's a much, much, much more uphill battle. I have nothing in common with him. I can try to talk about his wife and his kids. If he likes playing squash, I don't know if he likes playing squash. And frankly, when you're dealing with hyper competent people, they don't care if you care about squash or anything like that. You're rarely working in that domain. At Tom's School of Life, you say, hey, I love what you're doing. I think you're a great leader in the cause of liberty. I have a tremendous respect for your organization. Is there any way that I can help? That's a very watered down version. I suggest coming to these people that are hyper competent with specific proposals. But it's an opportunity like none other. And I think the majority of the people that I've encountered are hyper competent technicians that are interested in either doing freelancing, consulting, or breaking out into a kind of business in a different industry. If you're in the former two categories, if you're a hyper competent technician that's interested in working with multiple bosses, multiple clients, this is effortless. You just need to find the guy who will hire.
Maybe what you can do in the accountability group in that situation is use the group to help identify a concrete value proposition that you then bring to the individual.
Right.
Because then your facilitator can be like, oh, you are a back-end person who wants to deal with this and that industry. Let me show you all the people who are in that industry.
I also think it's very important, and this is a bit of an advertisement, to go to be in Orlando in January and to really avail yourself of that opportunity.
100%.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know why I'm in such a hardcore business mode today. Hopefully my vague innuendos are.
Jeremy, you are always in a hardcore business mode.
That's not true.
You always have sexual innuendos, and that is apparently your definition of fun.
Green means money.
Cut.
It's money. It's about money day. This is about dollars.
Uh-huh.
Well, it's not that. I mean, fundamentally,
I'll add a bit of levity. You complimented my squinty eyes. Or maybe you commented in the past, and I came across a photograph of me. I was decorating the tree at my parents' house this weekend, and there was a childhood photo. I was about 9 years old, and let me tell you, it was very blue steel. So
already,
even at nine,
David, you know you need to show us this picture now, though. Like, you have
share
to.
your screen. Come on now.
So I will hide the other kids in the photo. Because
I don't know how you do that. Yeah, for context.
And you're gonna love the sweater selection. You're gonna love this. Was probably what would you say? I don't know, 3rd, 4th grade. Can you guys see this guy? Look at that guy.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, you're squinting.
That's a full
the best
squint.
part is that I'm in the
smirk.
In the middle of the group and everything. It's, come on. This was bound to be.
Crooked smirk.
It was always there, Jeremy. He didn't even have to earn it.
The context is Jordan Peterson will talk quite a bit about this in Maps of Meaning, which, by the way, is a phenomenal course. Who cares about his political stuff? I don't. I admire him for a lot of his political stuff. The course is very, very good psychological overview of how people perceive the world. Early on, children are wide-eyed and receptive. They're taking in everything. But Mufasa, because we're talking Jordan Peterson, this inevitably falls back to Lion King or Pinocchio, in this case, Lion King. And Mufasa is squinting over the horizon because as you become mature, an adult, you are projecting influence rather than receiving.
So David has always been projecting influence. Yes.
I was rich in influence at a young age.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're gonna snap the line there.
Yeah.
This was great. Thanks for the thoughts. I think this is gonna be really valuable. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.